Today we're asking tube screamer or tube driver? Dan?
That's not a knife.
What? Welcome to That Pedal Show. Mick here.
Dan here.
Hello. Yeah, as you can see, no wingman today. Main man, whichever way you want to look at it. Dan is unfortunately under the weather, so he's not here. The show must go on. We're going to do some filming anyway, aren't we, Dan?
That's not a knife.
I'll stop that. Okay, tube driver or tube screamer. Now, the reason we're doing this show, all right, mate, is because we recently did a show called Blues Driver or Blues Breaker, and that's because there's a bit of confusion sometimes about those two pedals. I've been confused about them down the years. So it was a good idea to put them next to one another and just really get into the differences, plus look at some of the evolutions of the circuit as they are. I don't think too many people are going to confuse tube driver and tube screamer. You never know. One being the classic Ibanez TS9 tube screamer as designed by Mr. Susumu Tamura back in the day. This is a modern TS9 reissue. There's many variants thereof. And of course the BK Butler tube driver, Brent Butler, I think I'm right in saying originally designed for keyboards back in the day in the 70s, again has been through many iterations over the years. This is a reasonably recent version thereof, and I do believe you can still order them from the BK Butler website. The main difference, of course, being that the tube driver uses a real valve inside, albeit in combination with an op-amp. It's not a pure valve design. The tube screamer is the classic op-amp and clipping diodes configuration that we know so well to this day, which gets really interesting when we get into the Envy. So the way I'm going to structure the show is you'll hear them. I'm going to start off with some lower gain sounds and just compare tube driver and tube screamer just for the hell of it. Move on to some sort of mid and higher gain sounds, although neither is sort of high gain in the modern version of the word. And then ask what it is about the Envy from Mythos pedals, and indeed the 12AX7 Overdriver from Hagerman that's any different to these original pedals. Now, the Envy is obviously very closely related to the tube screamer. The Hagerman 12AX7 Overdriver, not so much to the tube driver. And of course, we could have chosen any number of modern tube screamer or valve overdrive pedal variants to put in today's show. But these are two that have never been on the show before, and it'd be good to have a listen. Right, tube screamer then, we know it. I'll start off with the gain lower and the level up, and this is the classic way you'd hear it with Strats. We'll also,
All right, mate.
we'll also use some humbuckers in a minute as well, but amps today,
I wonder what the settings are.
PRS HDRX 20 and 2-Rock Classic Reverb Signature. They're running absolutely together, except that the Future Factory delay, which you can see on the board, is only going to the 2-Rock. Together the amps sound like this. Quite a lot of headroom in that sound. The PRS is breaking up a little bit earlier than the 2-Rock, which you'll hear as we get into it. All right, TS9 then at lower gain settings. you can really hear how it pushes that mid-range. We often say with a tube screamer has a nose, we'd use the phrase nose, which would be frequency somewhere between 500 to 800 hertz, something like that, with quite a steep Q on it. Q being how narrow the mid-push frequencies are, and it gives it that distinctive mid-range character, which is of course brilliant for single coil pickups because it gives them fatness where they need it. And part of the idea with the Tube Screamer early doors was to push amps, cleaner amps, into further overdrive. Also more overdriven amps, maybe tighten up that bottom end a bit and just give a bit more clarity. Okay, so if we switch to the Tube Driver, I've never fully understood the EQ in the Tube Driver other than I've read when it's at 0, it's flat. You will notice that as we put it, it starts to sound very EQ-y, loads and loads of bass and treble. But let's have a listen. That's not a knife. I'll tell you what's really interesting about that. To me, the Tube Screamer seems like it's retaining quite a lot of high end. Even though those mids are being pushed for the note clarity, the Tube Driver seems to have a less overt mid-range as you would imagine, and some of the low end is starting to stack up quite nicely there. I'll just switch to humbuckers to have a listen to that before we turn the gain up. Obviously we'll be hearing a bit more overdrive from both pedals now. Here's just the amps on their own. Sorry, I'm smiling because the extra kind of low mid push from the Leicester is so lovely. Super interesting. Obviously the Tube Screamer is staying more defined on the bottom end. Now if we turn the Tube Driver bass all the way down to 0, let's see if that's still the case. That's interesting. So on this particular Tube Driver, it's a 5-knob version, which means there's an extra pot on the back which deals with the bias for the tube. And if you turn it down, it should get less overdriven. But I think what we're hearing there is that it's quite hard to get the cleaner output from the tube driver that we can get from the tube screamer. So low gain, it's quite hard to get it as loud. As you can see, the output level there is up real high on the tube driver and the drive is down low, the bias is down just below halfway. If we bring those things back up, it will get much louder, but it will also get much more overdriven. What I love about that is even with the drive down low like that, we're fully into rock territory. As you bring up that EQ, it's putting more gain all the way through, so we're getting more and more overdrive, more and more overdrive. We will just test the cleanup in a sec off the guitar pot, but right off the bat, tube screamer or tube driver, tube screamer surely into a cleaner amp is bluesier kind of sound, to be reductive about it, tube driver, rockier kind of sound. And I guess if we think the two most famous places that I can think of hearing tube screamers, one would be tube drivers, sorry. One would be David Gilmour, Pink Floyd, and of David Gilmour. And the other being Eric Johnson, two very famous users of tube drivers. Both their sounds that we would think of as their overdriven sounds, more rock than the tube screamer. Okay, let's up the gain a bit then and see where we get to. I'm trying to play something less. No, let's keep doing it. That upper mid kick in the tube screamer in this particular setup here is just perfect for pushing that kind of real vocal thing in the upper ranges of the Lester. Now, EQ wise, it's really important to say when you're talking about your overdrive pedal, you know, what is the main thing that you play? What do you want the overdrive pedal for? Because what it's seeming to me is, if you want that kind of slightly more rock power chord sitting in the mix a little easier, nice present highs, the tube driver is really doing the job, you know, for the rock, right? But maybe as we venture further up the neck, slightly fewer mids, and without that sort of really vocal push in the mids, maybe the tube screamer is a little bit better suited. I don't know. I think you can make a pretty strong case for both. Let's just try a bit of cleanup a minute. I mean, that's a pretty gainy sound, certainly almost as gainy as I would ever use. Just going to roll the volume on the guitar down a bit and see where we get to cleanup wise. Right up there at these higher gain ranges, it cleans up a bit. I mean, this guitar cleans up really, really nicely. Generally, you know, it's not, the pickups aren't super high output, so I would expect a little more cleanliness from other overdrive pedals, but not really why you choose either of these, is it? Killer. I mean, I'd forgotten how good the stock TS9 sounds. This is just an off-the-shelf reissue. Now, it seems to suit these amps pretty well. This one is obviously Fender derived and with a bit of Dumble thrown in, and that one is very, very, very Marshall derived. So you're hearing a mix of the two schools of thought. Let's not hang about then. Let's move on to the newer pedals. The reason I've chosen the Envy, in fact, let's go back to the Strat. Just to give your ears a rest and a bit of something different, we're going to go to an E-flat Strat for a minute. I will try some humbuckers again in a minute. An E-flat Strat because I was a Stevie Ray Vaughan freak for years and years and years, and the Tube Screamer, that kind of amp, and E-flat is certainly in that territory. So we'll indulge a little bit. Turn drive down. The reason we've chosen the Envy,
put some bloody snags on the barbie.
There are so many Tube Screamer clones out there. I don't know if it's the most cloned pedal in the world. Got to be up there, hasn't it? Because it's so influential. Could have chosen loads. My particular favourite, and has been for many years, is a Keeley mod that was done many years ago. This is interesting because what Zach has done here from Mythos is he's addressed the two things that annoy people about Tube Screamers. One is the overt level of compression in the gain because of the way those diodes clip. Secondly, an option to put a bit more bottom end back in. And those are the two switches you see to either side of the tone knob. There is a further thing that you can do inside. So if you read much on Tube Screamers, I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. One of the things that people will often end up talking about extensively is the opamp, the chip, right? The IC, the integrated circuit. Famously in many Tube Screamers, certainly in 808s, JRC 4558D opamp, which is said to have a significant effect on the tone. Hesitant pause, because it probably does. I mean, I've never got, even as a massive fan of Tube Screamers, I've never got into it hard enough to really get into all that. As standard, the Envy comes with an RC 4558 chip, but in the bag are also a whole bunch of other chips, including a TL72 and some other stuff, because the socket is in the back there, and you can swap the chips out if you want. Now, it is said that you'll hear that difference much more if you remove the clipping diodes. I don't know if we're going to quite get there today. You can do that at your leisure. Instead, the more obvious sound differences you're going to hear are those two switches on the top. So let's have a listen between the TS9 and the Envy then. I'll see if I can, I'll start off with a TS9 sound that I like, and we'll see if we can get the Envy to sound similar before we move forward. I was just checking which way around the switches work. The bass switch is less bass, what you might think as more traditional tube screamer territory on the in the up position. The clip is clipping more in the up position, I think. You'll notice a great deal of more headroom if you remove it, which we'll do in a sec. Anyway, back to our tube screamer tone. Killer. The mid's in a slightly different place. I would say that Envy actually sounds more like my old 808 than that TS9, but killer. I think we're absolutely in that territory. So let's add some more bottom end in then, because the first thing people moan about with tube screamers is when there's not enough bottom end. I'll get some humbuckers out in a sec. So it sort of feels like that removing the clip, adding the bottom end in, we've sort of moved out of tube screamer territory here, and I'm going to pick up the humbuckers again just to see where we are. I think what we're working towards now is, you know, tube screamer, super useful pedal with the mid-humped overdrive there, and we know the sound of it can be really, really cool for juicing other pedals. We'll hear that in a second with the overdriver. But I think what we're getting towards now is a more full range type versatile overdrive, which is handy to have within the Envy, right? Yeah, if you'll forgive the kind of extended playing, one of the things I'm doing there by letting some of those notes ring out in the earlier bit and trying to find it is just to see where the kind of feedback point is, because what you've got going on with a bit of volume is interaction with the guitar, and it all starts to get really nice and lovely, and it happens in different places with the Envy and the TS9 because of where that mid is. Now, with the clipping diodes out and the bottom end back in again, you're sort of closer to a more full range distortion in the Envy overdrive, should I say. And it's really nice, makes it super, super versatile, depending on what you need. And it does definitely have that sort of harmonic thing that starts to happen and push the notes into feedback if you're into that kind of game. I haven't really done much neck pickup stuff. When it comes to humbuckers, I'm much more a bridge pickup kind of person. But anyway, let's see what we get on the neck before we move on to the overdriver. It's this one, isn't it? The Two Rocks going, yeah, come on then. Everything you've got, I'll take it. The weight that the Envy gives on that bottom end, certainly when you're up here, sometimes, seems to me anyway on a Les Paul, that these notes up here have much more weight. No, it doesn't seem to me. It's just a truth. These notes up here have got way more weight than they do on most single coil guitars. So the need to put it back in with a pedal, maybe less so. But if you like that kind of thing, you know, getting towards Santana-y type sounds, maybe that kind of thing, it's nice to have the extra bottom end. Nice. Okay, let's have a listen to this 12AX7 Overdriver then. Hagerman. So Jim Hagerman built something called the Hagerman half watt, which was like a half, actually a 1 watt, I think. Might even have been 2 watts at full whack. Anyway, very tiny little amp that we featured on a show many months ago. And Jim does work in all kinds of tube-related world, including hi-fi. This is a very simple, I mean, I say simple, ostensibly simple, all-valve overdriver. Now, it doesn't have a huge amount of gain in it. What it does have is a massive amount of level. And I guess, well, let's hear it. Let's hear it. So we'll stick the tube driver. This is kind of how I would use the tube driver, right, with these sorts of settings. And depending on the song I'm playing, just to give us some context, the drive would be there or a shade or two lower. So I never use the drive any higher than that personally. Tangent! So right off the bat, the tube driver's got way more gain. And that's how the overdriver is designed. It's not designed to be a high gain device. What the overdriver does have is a fantastic amount of level and output, which, as we said before, the tube driver is kind of struggling with. About struggling, it's loud enough to use, but the 12AX7 overdriver can go way more. Now, tonally, you might decide that you prefer the tube driver because there's more gain, it's squashier, it's much more compressed. Under the fingers, it feels slightly easier to play because the overdriver is way more revealing. But of course, what you get is more note definition, more of what you play in terms of what's coming off here comes out. It doesn't get lost in compression, which should mean, I am hoping it means when we turn the volume down, it will also stay nice and clean. Let's see. I'm having a lot of fun playing loud today. I would say completely different game from the tube driver for what it's worth. Reiterate, there's tons and tons of tube overdrive pedals that we could choose. Haven't mentioned Kingsley today. Obviously, Dan and I use Kingsley pedals left, right and centre. Probably our favourite valve overdrive pedals. We have a few of them. They've been on the show a lot, which is why the Hagerman's on, just as something different. I am really liking this. Like, if you want something that's more, also that has the mumbo to really push the front of your amp. So if you like to use your amp just on the edge and you really want to whack the front end of it, push the amp into sag and compression and all that nice stuff, I think this is great. I really love the 3-knob simplicity of it. I just want to see the range of the tone control a minute. Dig it. Final thing just to try is that Jim says that it really responds well to something in front of it. He says a clon or a tube screamer. Well, good news. We've got the tube screamer. We'll set it like that. So let's have a listen. Let's go, I don't know, here. Why not here? There's a good place. Again, much wigging out. Killer. It's got the headroom to take, being hit pretty hard by something in front, but it just pushes that overdrive into just this wonderfully rich place. Might be a bit over the top for whatever it is you're looking for. So whether you boosted it with a tube screamer, well, anything really, might work really well nicely with a treble booster, all that kind of stuff. I think it would probably take a fuzz pretty well as well. Okay, no Dan today. Sorry if it's a bit, you know, anodyne without him, because there's no banter.
That's not a knife.
But I think we got into it. Tube driver or tube screamer, clearly with the Strat for the, you know, post Stevie Ray thing, it's tube screamer every single day of the week for me. Moving slightly more towards rock, more versatile, slightly more gain, all-rounder, definitely tube driver. The Envy is one of the few TS types, derivatives, that I think really holds muster because of those two Switches. Now, Zach is not the first person to do either of those two things, but I like the simplicity of the way it's presented, and it certainly sounds killer, and it's got tons and tons of headroom. I really, really love that about pedals when they go loud, because it means you can really, it's not always about the volume that you're playing at, it's about pushing that amp, which of course is one of the things that the Tube Screamer was designed to do, to get the amp really working. And then the overdriver, man, I mean, Dan and I talk about the Kingsley Page a lot. I think the Kingsley Page has probably got a bit more gain in it. But as a more pedal that is kind of low to low medium gain with a ton of character in a really super easy format, I really, really dig that a lot. Certainly in terms of not too much compression, feels great under the fingers and keeps clarity and all of that alive. Good. Right, hope that was useful. Normally Dan would chip in now and say something hilarious.
That's not a knife.
Etc. Hopefully he'll be back next week, recovered from his coughing fit. Until then, Tube Screamer, Tube Driver, let us know. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you've chosen. And please subscribe. Please go to thatpedalshowstore.com. That's how we fund this show. And we'll see you next week for more fun. And if you want to get into the comments, Monday nights we do a live viewer comments and questions show, so we can talk all about it then. See you next time. Thanks for being with us.